Discovery Channel for this year's Biker Build-Off. This actually has a V-Rod motor in it, which is something I've never used before, and I believe only one other person has. I actually got it direct from Harley. They gave me the motor, okayed me to use it, and I built a custom frame off of it. It's got a 360 tire, single-sided swing arm, a 23-inch front wheel, full air suspension so it sits on the ground, no kickstand. I did a transmission brake, put the radiator in the back, hit everything. I mean, there's a lot of just one-off features, suicide shift, and I just kind of put a lot of one-off stuff onto this bike, which turned out pretty cool. When I built this frame, I just kind of set the motor on the bench and built the frame around the motor, so it looks like, you know, it barely fits in there, but it turned out really good. I'm really happy with it. This particular motor I had, actually, when I got it, it was a stock motor, and I took it apart and had it polished. And then some pieces chromed on it, so it just, you know, makes the motor look a lot nicer. On the front of the bike, there's a grill, and in between the gas tanks, I made kind of an air box that channels air like a velocity stack into a plenum in the throttle body. So it actually is all kind of hidden, but it's all stuff that has to be there for the motor to work. The air filter, I've always hated this side of the V-Rod. It always had the water tanks, the water lines that went to the radiator, and I always hated that. So I put a old style air cleaner, and I turned it into the overflow tank for the radiator. So it kind of gives it, you know, this bike I was trying to do the retro look, so it kind of gave me the retro look, but it still functions at the same time. The 23-inch wheel is just something that just kind of kept the bike in proportion. The bike from far away looks small, but when you get up to it and start looking at it, it's actually a fairly large bike. And the 23 actually is a little bit wider than the 21, so with the big back tire, it kind of gave me a little bit more control. The front end rockers on this bike I actually made. It was to bring the trail correct on the front end because of the 23-inch tire, the height of it, the trail would have been wrong with the rockers on a traditional Springer, so I had to make my own to bring the trail correct so the bike handles perfect at all speeds. The transmission brake is an idea that I've had actually a long time, not particularly for the V-Rod, but for the big twins. We actually built a bike that has a transmission brake on it. It really cleans up the bike, especially with the single-sided swing arms. But this particular one, I used a go-kart brake that just happened to be the right size, and I made the flange and the adapters and the sprocket and everything to basically work with that. So it's just a one-off piece that I made. With this bike, like I said, I was trying to do like a retro, the extreme of new and the extreme of old, you know. The old being kind of like the styling, the way the seat is and the ape hangers and the suicide shift. The new being like the 360 tire and the V-Rod motor. So I was just trying to do the extreme of both and kind of blend them, but still make it look nice. The big thing on this particular show, the Biker Build-Off, is you have to build it in a certain amount of time and ride it on an average of 700 miles. So this bike we actually did about 500 miles and didn't have one problem. It turned out, I mean, unbelievable. It's the best bike I've ever built.
Apart from the Rush to Judgment bikes for the Biker Build-Off show, Matt Hodge's bikes are all painstakingly hand-built over a period of months by the man himself. And if you want one, it'll cost you at least a couple of $100,000. And those with deep enough pockets are happy to stump up this kind of cash for something as truly original as these machines. If you've got the money, it's not too much to pay for a genuine work of automotive art.
On this particular bike, it was built last season's Biker Build-Off, episode 10. And all the builders, Eddie Trotta, we had Hank Young, Chica, Mitch Bergeron, Kendall Johnson, Russell Mitchell, Joe Martin, Corey and Arlen Ness, I don't even know who else I'm leaving out here, but I believe that's it. But all 10 of us actually had to build this bike in 3 days, just as a kind of challenge to kind of come together. We all had a specific part to do on the bike, and Chica was in charge of the tank, so he kind of drew the tank, and so that's why there's a lot of sharp edges on this bike. We all kind of wanted to fit the theme of it. So Russell was in charge of the handlebars. The front end was Eddie Trotta. Paint and parts were Corey and Arlen Ness. Joe Martin was the pipes. I was the fenders. Kendall Johnson was the motor. Who else? Hank Young did the oil tank, and Mitch Bergeron did the frame. Danny Gray actually came down with all his equipment and made this seat for us. The black and white piece is actually Stingray that's been dyed. It's what they call a zebra Stingray, but it doesn't really exist. The billet piece that goes in the frame, that's actually Mitch Bergeron's idea. That's something he does on his bikes, and he was in charge of the frame, so that's the part that he did. The angle grinding was all kind of Arlen's and Joe Martin's idea. They were actually painting it, and we all kind of, we didn't have time to paint everything, and that frame was actually powder coated, so it was just a little detail to break it up from just black, because we only had a few hours to get it done. It was actually pretty satisfying. When you think about it at first, you think 10 people with big egos getting in the same room for 3 days, you thought it'd be pretty difficult, but we all kind of set our egos aside and got the job done, so it all worked out pretty good. We made a lot of good friends out of it, and when we were done, we actually gave the bike to the guy who helped basically come up with the biker build-offs, Hugh King, so we all presented it to him, and he was really stoked.
So far, the custom bikes that we've seen have tended towards the exotic, but not every chopper has to have a wild paint job, lots of chrome, and technology that's out of the edge of reason. SoCal builder Jimmy Shine is the epitome of California cool, and his bike at the Grand National Roadster Show perfectly illustrates his character. Understated, but with amazing attention to the detail items, Jimmy's bike has the classic chopper look made familiar by the outlaw bikers of the 60s and early Harley drag racers. And unlike many of the motorcycles that it shared the exhibition space with, it was a bike that you could actually imagine yourself riding every day.
I've been building this one for about a year, and it's really a culmination of ideas I've had for a long time. Just having the time to get around to do it, besides working on customer vehicles and bikes and race cars and race schedules, so on and so forth. It's kind of hard to find the time all the time. In any event, I've been working on this for about a year. What appears to be an old panhead is actually a brand new Evolution Harley-Davidson engine, more or less. They're specialty cases which allow to use the early bolt pattern for the barrels and the heads. So the whole lower end is actually an Evolution, and then it's got shovel head barrels and STD pan heads. On the STD pan heads, they have the same intake runners as a shovel head and very similar exhaust to the Evolution. It really is a pan head, but it's made out of just the good stuff. The side cover, the cam cover on the motor, is actually a reproduction piece that was made to look like an early generator motor side cover. What used to be up in this area was the generator. This motor, being an Evolution, actually has the alternator over here on this side. So that's just a dummy area. So I utilized that, made that into my oil filter bracket. So with a long, deep chrome oil filter, at a glance you'd look at it and go, that looks like a proper panhead motor. That looks like where the generator should be. I actually went so far as to take my carburetor apart, because all these new carburetors, they only come in like this bright silver finish. It's kind of like I think it's a cast aluminum, but they're nice. But the early carburetors were gold or brass. So I actually did this carburetor in a chem film gold, just so it kind of gives it that early look to it, because I'm kind of going for that late 50s, early 60s look, just with my spin on it. The style of this bike is primarily early 60s and early 60s style bobber. I used a 1948 Harley Davidson front end. I just love them, just the shape. It's very Art Deco with all the sweat fit cast pieces. I love that look, but once you get up to the handlebars are straight with bends and clamp-on brackets and stuff I don't like. So what I ended up doing was I made all my own pieces and I bent my own handlebars in one continuous arc. So it actually kind of carries on the same theme as the front end. And nothing on it is bolt-on except for the levers, of course. Everything is welded, fit, and chromed with an internal throttle. I found the headlight at an old Ford car parts junkyard, and I bought it and I made it into my headlight. See, the early bikes used to have real long rear fenders, and the guys would, buy a brand new bike, take it home. First thing they do is they drive the pin out of the hinge, take the back part of the fender off, put a Sparto light on it, and they got themselves a bobber, Take the front fender off, throw it in the trash, and they had a little hot rod bike, Yeah, it's a Sparto tail light. I think they've been making those since probably late 40s, early 50s. I'm not sure. I just think they look really cool. The tank is like a King Peanut style tank. I actually bought it because it just had the right basic shape that I wanted to work with, and it saves me a ton of time. But I cut the center of the tank out, and I actually drove all these chrome details into a piece of steel and formed it to fit the tank, and cut the tank out, hammer welded it, and then went back, filed, sanded, and finished, and re-chromed the whole tank and the fender. The fender and the tank are the same. So these chrome details in the tank and fender are actually the fender and the tank. They were completely chromed, and we just went back masked everything, did all the body work, and painted it. So these pieces are the tank. And then I went so far as to also making my own badges. I think that just really finishes it off. I've seen a lot of badging done by other builders and such that look really bitchin'. They're all painted, but I wanted mine to look like a real, almost like an automotive badge, like a Chrysler badge or something. The seat, the running boards, and the grips. I believe that a motorcycle is so visual, so visible, with a rider on it. But I think every point that the human body touches riding the bike should match. So my grips and running boards and seat are all done the same. They're all done in hand-tooled leather. The pipes are stainless steel. Once again, all my design. I made my own oil tank that looks like it's really heavily welded and shaped and filed, because I wanted it to have like a cast look. So when it was all done and sanded and polished, everything is nice and smooth and it looks like a cast piece. The pedals, the brake, the shifter, they're actually a Model A Ford. And I machined the side of my cam cover and made this. It's also a running board mount and the pivot point for the pedal to actuate the brake with a remote master cylinder back here. 5-speed Jim's transmission. The battery box in it's actually a chopped and channeled military ammo case. And I made it just fit my battery. Because a lot of stuff, I don't like to hide things. Instead of hiding something, I'd rather build it and make it interesting, give you something to look at. Anybody can build a cover over their entire bike and make it all swoopy. Once you take that cover off and make what's underneath look good, you lose the essence of a bike by covering it up. Make it neat. The primary cover that covers the belt, it has a belt primary that connects the engine to the transmission instead of a chain. I don't like to see just a flat plate, like a pant guard to keep your pants out of the belt. I like it to look stock, or it could be stock. What I actually did is I needed the provisions in the primary to bolt the starter in, because I'm tired of kicking my bikes. I finally built one for myself with a starter. But what I did is I utilized a part of a 1993 big twin Harley Davidson primary, and I cut it down and shaped it. They actually have a really nice shape just from the get-go. And then I took an early tin primary. They were made from 36 to 54, I think. But I cut it and I skirted it and I made it deeper to cover the belt. And then hand sanded and filed and went nuts on it again and had it all chromed. So the two pieces, the 1993 and the early tin primary, they're actually cut. You can barely see a seam where they just kind of bolt together. But you stand back a couple feet and look at it, it looks like one piece. It looks like an early tin primary yet it has provisions for the starter on it. I'm proud of that. It took a lot of time. I don't know, I like cars, I like bikes. Just depends on, what I feel like doing today. I'm not a biker, I'm not a hot rodder, I don't know, I do what I like.
Ever since the Grand National Roadster Show began almost 60 years ago, motorcycles have been part of it. But they've never had their own ultimate award like the Hot Rod Cars America's Most Beautiful Roadster Trophy. This year, the show organizers decided to do something about it and created the award for America's Most Beautiful Motorcycle. Just as with the car award, the AMBM trophy hopefuls had to go through a process of elimination. First of all, the judges went through the entire show entry and narrowed their choices down to a shortlist selection. These choices were based on a number of things integral to custom bike art. Factors such as overall design and concept, general engineering, metalwork, paintwork, detail items, and of course, quality of workmanship all played their part. These are the bikes then that were selected as the finalists in the 2005 America's Most Beautiful Motorcycle Contest. And, as you can see, the judges' task to select a winner was never going to be an easy one. And when everything was done and dusted, this bike was the winner. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Wicked Way, owned by Steve Dobb of Hillsborough, California, and voted America's Most Beautiful Motorcycle 2005 by the judges at the Grand National Roadster Show. And finally, let's complete the circle and go back to where we started. Back in chopper heaven at the Daytona Beach Bike Week. Rock on and ride free.